Hello and welcome everyone to our 255th session of these little audio recordings. This time we are still in the question of our three students in Germany, Susi, Vossi and Pacino, who have asked kind of two questions about relationship. So the first one was how meditation might raise the quality of a relationship. And the second question, which we will be discussing today, is based on a bit of a story. So the story is that in a relationship, when both are living apart from one another, let's say one is living in city A and the other is living in city B, and so they spend time apart. Like, let's say each week they spend time apart, both following their jobs, and then on the weekend they meet, like either in apartment A or apartment B. Then they spend some time together, have a wonderful experience, a nice time together, and then they have to separate again. So this time it's about this experience of missing the other person or needing some sort of feedback that me as the person that is missing the other person, that I care about the other person so much that I suffer their absence. Okay, so it's this idea that only if you show me that you suffer without me, does that count for me as a proof of love. So you love me so much that you can't live without me, that you can't be without me. And if you're not showing me that, then it means you're indifferent. So basically, the question that is kind of summarizing this whole story, or that is at the base of the whole story, is what's the difference between equanimity and indifference? So they are well aware that equanimity is a quality that we practice, that we cultivate. But there is a confusion, and that confusion is very common between indifference and equanimity. Many people think that if I practice equanimity, meaning I am not shaken by either positive or pleasant, negative or unpleasant, or neutral sensations and experiences that hit me during my life, I'm not shaken by them. That's equanimity. It's a quality of mind which is, you could say, firmly centered. And being centered, maybe the good image for equanimity would be like a mountain that is sometimes in a storm, sometimes there are clouds, sometimes it rains, sometimes the sun shines, but the mountain just simply stays there. It's firmly grounded and centered and strong, and in a certain way very calm. So the quality of equanimity, it is something that we cultivate, it's something that we practice. However, many people then think, well, wait a second, if I'm unshaken by positive, negative, or neutral sensations or experiences that come my way, then doesn't that mean that I kind of become like a robot? I don't care. I'm not an emotional being anymore. I feel nothing. Like, for example, when my partner moves away after a nice weekend and they go back to their home apartment, I'm feeling stricken with grief. I'm missing them. And for me, it's very dramatic. But for the other person, for my partner, it's like not a big deal. It's nothing. And they don't show any big emotional upheaval or any anxiety or sadness whatsoever. So they are quite calm. That might upset me, and then I might confuse that. I might think, okay, wait a second, they're practicing meditation, they're practicing equanimity. Will I become like them? It means kind of like a dead piece of wood that doesn't have any emotions, that doesn't feel any needs or any warmth or love. For them, everything is kind of the same. They're always in this flatline state, like the centered mountain. There's no much change going on. Is that the case? So people wonder whether indifference equals equanimity. And that's, of course, not the case. Indifference is, however, known as the near enemy of equanimity. It means it is something that's very similar, but it's not the same, and so it can be easily confused. Like, for example, love and attachment. Love can easily be confused with attachment. Or, for example, compassion can also easily be confused with pity. So there are different near enemies to those wholesome states. So equanimity is, without a doubt, it's a wholesome state of mind. It's something that is uplifting you, and it's taking you above the continuous changing currents of emotional, physical, mental states in this world. So it can be seen as a great tool to possess, because the world and life and people, they are not the way we want them to be. In case you haven't noticed yet. So the world is not the way you want it to be. It's not ideal. People are not the way you want them to be. They're not ideal. Your own emotions are not the way you want them to be. Your body is not the way you want it to be. There's so many things in our life, if you really pay attention, that are not the way we feel that they should be. So given that, how do we operate in a world in a caring, concerned and kind way without being swept off our feet by the various currents that are less than ideal or not ideal at all? That's where equanimity comes in. Well, indifference here simply means, I think the definition is a lack of interest, concern, or sympathy, which is a nice definition for indifference, I think. Here we're talking of a lack of interest, first of all, a lack of interest, a lack of concern or care, and a lack of sympathy. Now, in a person that has some degree of equanimity, most people haven't perfected it, but there's some degree of equanimity within each one of us. All these qualities, such as interest, concern, or sympathy, still exist. You still care. You're still kind. You still want the best for yourself and others. You still would like yourself and others to be free from suffering. But the world is not like that. Even though you might have your best in mind and you help a good friend, and you do something really nice for them and you support them, and then in the end they turn around and stab a knife in your back, or behave in any other way, ungrateful or something like that. This happens frequently, happens to a lot of people. We might be then disappointed, right? We might feel like I did so much nice things for them and I was so kind to them, genuinely kind. But the answer and the response is really ungrateful and hurtful even. How comes? So here's where equanimity helps you to stay cool about it. You don't expect the world to be any other than it is. So you're able to deal with the negative impact that comes your way. Even though you did so many nice things, you're not swept off your feet if something negative comes in response. So that's a power. So equanimity allows you to stay calm and cool regardless of how the world moves. That does not mean, being calm and cool, does not mean that you don't care. All right? So that you're indifferent. That you have no sympathy. Of course you have a whole lot of sympathy. You can understand the other person. You can see their amount of suffering very clearly, but you are not pulled into it. That's what equanimity gives you. It gives you this power. You're not pulled into the various currents of suffering and pleasure that are interchangeably existing in this world. They're constantly moving into one another. Pleasure moves into pain, pain moves back into pleasure. Goodness moves into badness, badness moves back into goodness. So things are continuously changing. But you can see that clearly in the current situation in the world. Everything is turning round and round. One decision leads to another decision. That leads to another decision. There's just simply no end to all that. And equanimity allows you within the middle of all that. I think one of the old translations of the word, the Pali word is upekkha for equanimity. One of the old translation is close to something like standing in the middle of all this. So you're able to stand in the middle of this world and how it is standing in the middle of the truth of this world, the truth of relationships, the truth of emotions, namely that everything is continuously changing, but remaining unaffected by it. You're not suffering it. It doesn't become a burden to you. It's not heavy to you. Do you see what I mean here? It's actually simply means that you don't suffer the way things are. That's what equanimity gives you. It gives you a vantage point from which you can see the world clearly as it is. So it's very, very close to the development of wisdom, of insight, of clear seeing. Equanimity is very close to that. It gives you kind of a point from which you can cultivate the quality of wisdom really nicely. Because it's a still point in the mind. It's very calm. And no matter what happens, no matter what comes your way, it doesn't intrude in that calmness. It doesn't mix into the calmness like ink would mix with water. It's more like oil and water. Right? Equanimity is like the water, and the various circumstances of the world are like oil. They don't really mix. It does not mean that when something doesn't mix, that you cannot see clearly what is good and what is bad. That you all of a sudden lack any kind of discernment. That you see other people suffer in front of you and you have absolutely no sympathy, no concern for them, or no interest in them at all. That would be indifference. You see them and it's like it doesn't exist. But with equanimity, you see it, you understand it clearly, yet you don't suffer it. And this is a quality that we can cultivate and that is very worthwhile cultivating. And it comes together in this quadruplet of kindness, compassion, then it comes kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Those four qualities. Those called the four divine abidings. So these four qualities, they are cultivated very often together, but you can also cultivate them one by one, depending on the situation that you're in. So kindness is at the core of those. Kindness is the wish for yourself or others to experience happiness. True, genuine happiness. Not only the happiness of the world, like sensual pleasures and so forth, but actually, much more than that, a true happiness. A happiness that is experienced independently of the various phenomena that exist in the world. And happiness that is coming from within. Happiness born of seclusion. Happiness that is arising when the mind becomes completely, utterly still. That happiness is supreme, and it is incomparably nicer than any other happiness that could ever be experienced in the world. That's also why the Buddha calls it a blameless kind of happiness. It's a happiness that he encourages us to cultivate frequently and often. The happiness of seclusion, coming into deeper states of meditation, cultivating a calm, still mind. And cultivating the path in general. So we wish people to do what it takes to make themselves happy. We clearly understand, of course, we are each and everybody is responsible for their own happiness, which is it's good news, isn't it? Like you can't blame other people or the world for being unhappy. but you can find the reason for your unhappiness within your own actions, within yourself, within your mind here and now. If you can see clearly into what you are doing to yourself, then you also understand suffering. And compassion is the next quality, is the wish to be free from suffering. Of course, the more you understand suffering and its mechanics, the more you wish to be free from it. The more you also see how unnecessary it is. And so the more we see into these two qualities, the more we also, the more we cultivate those two qualities, the more we also see into what keeps them from us. If you cultivate kindness, you see what keeps you from being happy. If you cultivate compassion, you see what keeps you from being happy equally. It's the same, really. Therefore, they're very, very similar, these two, kindness and compassion. You see what makes you suffer. When you see what makes you suffer, you also see what keeps you from happiness, right? And then it's not enough that just to feel kind or to feel compassionate. It also is followed always by action. So you want to take the right action to liberate yourself from suffering and to, at the same time, cultivate happiness. Happiness is that what arises when suffering falls away. That is true happiness. Whereas the happiness of the world, the happiness, the standard normal happiness that we all know, it is always a pleasure that comes together with a pain. Whether the pain is for yourself or for others, whether it's in the future or presently existing, or based on some past pain. So this is the happiness of the world. The happiness that points beyond the world is a happiness which is independently existing of the world. It arises together with the falling away of suffering. Now the third quality that we cultivate is what kindness experiences when it sees someone else being happy, or when it sees yourself to be happy. It rejoices in that. And particularly if you're experiencing that kind of happiness which points to true happiness, to unshakable happiness, to happiness that is not of this world. Particularly then. Sure, you're also able to enjoy someone having success at simple things of our day-to-day life. Like if someone does something kind to someone else, you rejoice in that. It feels good to rejoice in that. And it makes two people happy. Not only the person that is being kind to someone else, but also, actually three people, also the person that receives the kindness and you. So it's a wonderful practice to multiply the power of happiness in this world, in this moment. So whenever you see someone having success, feeling good, going into a direction that will lead them to a more reliable, stable happiness, maybe even the happiness that is not of this world, rejoice in it. It's free happiness for yourself right there. Just feeling good for others. The enemy of this quality of sympathetic joy is jealousy. Right? It's a direct antidote to jealousy. The more you're able to rejoice in other people being happy and feeling good and doing the right thing, having success, you're working directly against jealousy. So it's very, very good. Because jealousy makes us miserable. And the final quality, right, it's the fourth, which is equanimity. Equanimity allows you, while being kind, compassionate, and joyful, and acting appropriately and good in any given situation, it allows you to remain calm when things go wrong. And it allows you to remain calm when things go right. You're not pulled into the vortex of worldly emotions, which are dual. They're living in exchange. So you have one positive emotion arising. At the other end of it, at the shadow side of it, there is the negative corresponding emotion. They're constantly whirling around and around. So you're not pulled into this. Equanimity allows you to act kindly, compassionately, and joyfully. Most importantly, to act skillfully in this world, but not be swept into the world. So you're staying firmly grounded in equanimity while still caring, while still having concern, while still being kind. So in this relationship story, those 4 qualities should be cultivated a lot. 1, it is kindness. Wishing your partner to be happy, well, and safe. Wishing your partner, most importantly, to be ultimately or truly happy. Wishing your partner to do anything it takes to lift him or herself up towards happiness that is out of this world, that is reliable, that gives them a true sense of refuge and calm and goodness. Also wishing your partner, of course, to be free from suffering. In the same breath that you're wishing them to be happy, you also simultaneously wish them to be free from suffering. Right? So whenever you see your partner suffer, that's a moment for compassion. You clearly recognize, oh, they are suffering. And then you jump in to help. You're not just indifferent about it. You see that they're suffering, so you can ask them if they need help. Sometimes your partner might be suffering, but they wouldn't admit that they're suffering because it's a sign of weakness for most people to admit that they're suffering, so they wouldn't say, no, I'm fine. If you say, but I see that you're uncomfortable. I see that you are, like, your head hangs low and you're not smiling, your face, it all shows me that you're suffering. And the partner might still say, no, I'm not, I'm fine, I'm doing well. That is okay. Here you need equanimity. Let it be. Your partner doesn't want to talk about it right now. It's not the right time. So therefore you can, in communication with your partner, always ask questions. It's a very, very good habit of learning to ask questions rather than making assumptions or believing your own kind of thoughts about your partner. They might be wrong after all. Even if you think that you know your partner very well, it is still very often the case that we are massively wrong when we are assuming something about the other person. It's even hard to know ourselves properly. So how can we know someone else? So it's always a good idea to ask questions, right? Instead of just making assumptions. I see that you're suffering. That is very, very direct. Maybe better to ask, are you okay? And would you like me to help you or something like this? Or do you need me to help you? Always assuming that, or always giving your partner the chance to actually make a choice. Like if you push them against the wall, giving them no choice, but to be confronted with your assumption of them being like this or that, they will become defensive, of course, right? So it's also always a matter in a relationship of communicating skillfully with one another. And to understand, of course, that all the feelings that we have, they're basically just a game between pleasure and pain, suffering and happiness. But we all want happiness and we don't want suffering. If you understand that, you can act more kindly, with understanding. And you can be cool and at ease when your partner doesn't do what you want them to do or what you feel they should be doing or something like that. Then, see, very often when we look at our partner, we look at them, particularly when we're angry at them or when there is a kind of a time of bitterness and fighting, arguing, and we look at them from the perspective of, if you only were different, I could be happy. Right? Now remember your responsibility. You are responsible for your happiness, not your partner. Your partner is not a bird in a golden cage that needs to sing a nice little song for you to keep you entertained. Your partner is a free being. And so they act freely. They do what they want to do, just like yourself. You do what you want to do. Understanding that, we also understand our responsibility. Since I am free, I have the free will, I'm responsible for my own happiness. I'm responsible for my own suffering, not my partner, not anyone else. So, do I first of all notice that I'm suffering? Before I look at my partner's suffering, am I aware that I am currently suffering my partner's presence? My partner carries pain, and I don't like that. So, of course, I want to change them. I want them to be free from their pain. It sounds very compassionate, but really it isn't. Actually, we should properly say, I am disturbed by their pain. And then look first of all at our own pain. I am suffering my partner's pain. That would be probably the most honest thing you could say in that situation. Now, is there any way that you could be kind enough to yourself to free yourself from that suffering first, before you doctor around on your partner, before you direct your eyes at something other than yourself? Can you see that you are suffering right now? If you can see that, that is quite amazing. That's an achievement. If you can see honestly your own suffering right now, then you have a good chance to let it go, to allow it to dissolve, to care for yourself first. Now, once you have cared for yourself first, you'll be energized and you'll be happy. Happy enough to react to your partner with sympathy and kindness, being rooted in equanimity yourself. What allows you to be equanimous, first of all, is happiness. If you're unhappy, if you're not happy, if you're imbalanced in your emotions, it's really difficult to be equanimous. I'd say for the standard normal person, without any training, this is impossible. So first of all, you need to learn to remain equanimous to yourself, recognize your own feelings and your own stress, so that they not become a contribution to the relationship and to your partner's stress and suffering. So both kind of double up. Your partner suffers and you suffer on top of that. That's a bad situation. At least can you take out your suffering from the situation? And so it's only one person suffering. That's already much better. Now, is there anything that you can do to support and help that person who is suffering with kindness? Are you in the position to think kind thoughts, to act kindly towards the person who is suffering? If you are in that situation, great, go for it. You don't get the answer that you expect to get? Be equanimous about it. The world doesn't do what you want it to do, remember? It doesn't do what it should do. So, in that way, you use those four qualities interchangeably. Joy, kindness, compassion, and equanimity when things go wrong, when things don't go as you expect them to go, and in order to not be pulled into the vortex if things apparently go the way they, quote-unquote, should go. So I think that's all that comes to mind for this time, the difference between indifference and equanimity. I hope that became clear. Just to summarize it real quickly, equanimity is a state of calm that is unshaken by the various ups and downs of the world. It does not suffer the world's nature or truth. Whereas indifference, in fact, it is a state of suffering. It is a state of closing oneself up. It is a state that is a lack of interest, of concern or sympathy for others and for oneself. So it is an unwholesome state of mind. Whereas Equanimity is a wholesome state of mind. Equanimity lifts you up. Indifference brings you down. You notice that with people who are mostly indifferent, they are not leading happy lives at all. You notice it from yourself when you're in a state of indifference. It is not a pleasant state to be in. Whereas equanimity is a highly pleasant state. The more refined it becomes in your mind, the more pleasant it is. Okay, I hope that really helped you and gave you some new insights and maybe inputs for your practice. As I always say, I hope that you're using this special time of the coronavirus really well. Most of us are locked in our homes right now, which is great news for meditation practice and retreats and so forth. I hope you're making good use of that time, because it will end. It will come to an end like everything. And so at the end of that time, you can tell yourself, well, I made the best use of that time. I got better. I looked after my body. I exercised, looked after my mind. I meditated, and I attained various states that I couldn't have attained in the normal busyness of everyday life outside of the corona crisis. As always as well, I mentioned that if you do have any questions, feel free to send them to me. You can send them to me privately by email or on the Facebook Messenger or something like this. I read them regularly. Just let me know if you need to discuss anything in these sessions, and I will integrate it in one of the coming sessions. Good. For now, I think that is enough. I wish all of you a wonderful rest of the week and calm and equanimous weekend. All the best, guys. Bye-bye.